I was working for him for 6 months, and it took me 6 months to one day realize that actually it was not just this guy, it was actually him and his wife that
You'd
I
hired
was
a full
working
team.
with. I had apparently hired a full team. I kind of picked up on it because sometimes there would be these weird gaps in the knowledge of, like, we'd had some banter the day before about something random, and then the next day he seemed to have completely forgotten
Total
about
memory
it.
loss.
Anyone can be anything on the internet, and it's back to the point of trust that you actually sometimes have to ask these kind of what seems to be uncomfortable questions, like, hey, can you please turn on your webcam? Let's have a chat.
Hey everyone, this is Heini and Zachariassen here, and welcome to Founders Weekly, where we tell startup stories you can learn from. Today's topic is about working with global teams. Outsourced teams are your own teams around the world. My co-host today is Theis, Vivino co-founder and a friend. Welcome, Theis.
Thank you, Heine. Good to be here.
Great to have you here, Theis. This is something that we've done quite a lot of. Why do you think we keep ending up doing this all the time? We keep going back to it.
Yeah, we do. We've done it many times during our careers, over and over again. I guess it comes back to the fact that at different times in our lives, we are either very low on money, or we're just cheap and don't want to spend the money that we do have. I think for you and I, Heine, that's always been kind of the starting point, has been that it's actually been out of necessity. That has been the way that we've been able to get the amount of resources, of the amount of people that we needed for whatever project we were working on, and then we've managed to work with the strengths and negatives of having the outsourced team. But I think it's always started out of necessity for you and I.
But I think you're touching upon something. You focus a lot on cost there, but that also is speed. Meaning, okay, where can I find like an infinite supply really quickly so I can start building something tomorrow? So I would say not just cost, but also speed, right?
There's something about the ability to get started really quickly, because somewhere around the world, someone has the skills that you need and no job. And with these platforms you have available to you, can find these people, and so you can get started really well. The other way of looking at it, and I think that's also what you're hinting at, is we've had success with this also because, you kind of get more bang for your buck. But what that also translates into is that maybe you can have 3 people working on your product instead of 1. And that's something that you and I have been benefiting from a lot. I think, for example, if we take out Vivino, in the early days, we had a ton of competitors, and a lot of them were local teams, but in relatively expensive areas.
Very expensive areas, even.
Yeah, right. It could be in San Francisco, it could be in London, it could be in Paris, but places where if you wanted to have 5 engineers working on a thing, that actually cost you a lot of money. Whereas, we could also have 5 engineers working on it, but because they were based in India, in Ukraine, in Belarus, and other countries, we were actually able to kind of have those 5 people working on the project for the same amount of money as one would cost somewhere else. So it's you can choose to spend the same amount of money, you just get a lot more out of it.
Yeah, totally. I think that's really been a thing for us too, all the way through. We always sort of got quite frugal in the beginning when we were building, right? Some people would argue, hey, the quality wasn't there, maybe the speed wasn't there, but usually, there's some truth in that too. But you will get more. In the end, you will get more, at least. If it's 3 times the people, is it 3 times as much output? Probably not, but maybe it's 2 times, right? So yes, I think there's always more output.
For sure. And I think, it's not even a discussion that the quality wasn't there. And this is, of course, completely dependent on who you have working on it, how good you are at structuring it, and so on. The quality can vary a lot. It's not just that, someone, an engineer in country X is better on average than an engineer in country Y. It's not as simple as that, right? You can have amazing engineers all around the world. It's also a matter of like, how well are you at managing? And I think we're going to talk a lot about that today.
Totally. Okay, before we get the guest on here, Theis, who they've basically built a startup on actually having remote teams, and they're doing really, really well. But I want to talk a little bit about our journey, because the startup we did before Vivino, Bulgard, we actually had quite an extensive team in Bucharest, Romania, and it was actually, it's so long ago, that was before Bucharest or Romania was a part of EU. So what was that like starting with that, Theis?
Yeah, it feels like a different world to think about to think back on this. This was in 2003, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So a long time ago, Bucharest was a different place than it is today. It was before the EU, but you kind of knew that EU was on the menu. So Romania was doing a lot of things to kind of straighten out, like cut a lot of the red tape they had. There was a lot of administration that
Corruption.
over those years, actually a lot of corruption, but that over those years kind of got addressed and made it easier for businesses like ours to actually operate in that country. But I remember it as a great journey.
For sure.
I got a lot of good friends in Bucharest through that. It was always amazing to work with them, always very enjoyable to come and visit. And of course, it was a way, you just ended up working really closely together with these people. Bucharest is only an hour of time difference from Copenhagen. So it wasn't, there was a lot of day-to-day contact all the way through the day. But obviously it was through this kind of thin line of communication. There was a lot of, we didn't have Slack back then or anything. I remember we were working on all kinds of different messaging services.
ICQ and Messenger. And
ICQ, exactly. Yeah. I had Trillion, which you remember Trillion? Yeah. Trillion was this kind of,
aggregator.
It was an aggregator for all these kind of different messaging services. Anyway, you spend a ton of time on those kind of services. But it was it was a lot of hard work, but it was fun. It was just a way for us to get things done at a cost which was much more manageable. One thing I do remember about Bucharest in those years was that a lot of the larger IT companies went to Bucharest and started up their main offices in those years where we also had the office. And it just meant that the competition became fierce. And I remember that I started out having a ratio of like 1 to 5 on the salary side, where like, if I want to hire someone in Copenhagen versus Bucharest, I can get 5 in Bucharest versus Copenhagen. Through those years, that gap narrowed down to like 1 to 3, 1 to 2. It became a lot more expensive. And of course, so you kind of have to take that into account as well when you pick a market. What's the trend there, and how's that going to develop?
And I do remember even Theis, one thing is the cost. Hiring just became harder, right? We were a relatively small company. Suddenly, Microsoft is setting up a huge building on the outskirts of town. Yeah. And for the young ones, they're like, holy crap, we can work for Microsoft too. That's exciting, right? So you really have to think about that. So since then, Theis, we with Vivino, we've been in Belarus. We have been and are in Ukraine still, but we also worked in India. And if we sort of put some of those things together, like a lot of it's Eastern Europe, and then there's India. So what do you think about like cultural differences there? Because India is a very different place to Eastern Europe.
It is. And even just like one thing is culture, but there's also just this kind of, there are, let's say, physical things that are just different, right? Remember when we had to close down the office because there was a snake?
In the they sent us a picture of a snake. Hey, there's a snake in our office. We have to shut it down.
Yeah. At first you thought you were playing it cool and calling the bluff and saying, "Oh, are you talking about this? You just don't want to, it's a sunny day. You don't want to be working." And then they actually sent us a picture of the snake.
So real. Pretty real.
It was very real. So there's also just things like that are just massively different. And then there's the time zone difference. There's just a larger gap. But of course, you do have these general cultural differences. One thing that I think we really had to learn how to work with was that at least when we had a lot of people working for us in India, there was this tendency for people in our office just to never say no. Yeah. Right? They would always say that things were possible and they would get it done, and that whatever timeline was doable. And you really had to talk in a different. You couldn't just say, "Hey, can you get this done by Friday?" Because for sure you would say yes.
Yes, the answer was yes to that, no matter what.
So it wasn't really a valid question or answer. So you had to learn to kind of communicate and saying like, okay, so what are you going to get done by tomorrow? What about Thursday? What about Friday? And then you added it up and you could kind of see, okay, so they are actually going to be halfway done. Okay, let's take it from there. So you did have to take on these different ways of communicating because there was just this kind of thing of kind of, let's say, pushing a problem down the road. of saying, if I say yes
my
today,
job is to please you, Theis, whatever that takes. That's what it feels like sometimes, right?
And like if I can avoid the problem today, that's a good thing. So and maybe I'm piling up the problems, and by Friday it's going to be a really shitty day for me. But at least today is going to be fine, right? So I think we had issues like that, and you have to learn that about the different cultures that you're working with, kind of what is their communication style, and then you have to adapt to that. I think that's one of the main lessons for me through all these years of working to it. Like, you have to adapt your own communication style and the way that you lay out work to the culture that you're working in, because you're not going to change the culture.
No, you can't. You can't enforce it. There's 50 people or 10 people on the other side. You can't just, this is how, I mean, you can influence it, but just not fundamentally change it, really.
No.
Another thing I remember, and this was specifically from India, is that when they said they were done, we didn't always feel like it was done. I mean, so we started doing this expression and said, so is it done? Yes, it's done. But is it done? So for it to be done, we called it done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the general things that we experience, and I think that everybody experiences. If you use an outsourced team, that the whole sequence of testing and figuring out, are things actually the way that I wanted them, that's a whole art in and of itself. And it really comes down to how good are you at actually knowing what you want and communicating what you want. Because very often you can actually look at it and say, well, yeah, actually, if I look at it from a completely different angle from what I thought I should be, I could say that this is what I asked for.
Totally.
But it wasn't the way I was thinking about it. So you learn a lot about how you communicate, how you write up your specs, and so on. That's a huge part of doing this.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to talk more about that communication and specs and so on. But one thing I just always say, you have to be extremely precise, because their perception of the world is not the same as your perception of the world. And they're going to look at what you write, do as you say, and then put their perception of the world on top. And sometimes that just means totally different things.
No, absolutely. In our case, I think we often use them with success in very, let's say, executing roles, right? We knew exactly what we wanted, and then we had a remote team to execute it. And I had made very detailed specs, and I had very detailed screenshots of exactly what that meant in terms of the interface. And bringing those two things together, there was a quite clear path for them. But still, you end up spending. That's the thing. You save money on per hour, but you also need to spend more hours. There is just way more back and forth, more misunderstandings.
There's more pre-work and more back and forth. Right?
Yes, there is, right? So you have to put that into your setup. You have to have that as part of your work process. And again, just like with the communication and with cultural things, it's something that you just need to understand from the get-go and work into your process. And if you do that, you can be successful with it.
Totally. And if you're definitely saving some money on cost on how this works, but you have to do the full math on it. So, okay, they're going to be less productive, and you're going to spend more resources. You have to figure out that works for you, right?
Yes. If you don't know what you're doing, there's a lot of hidden costs. If you know that you're doing what you're doing, those costs are, you can make them known to yourself from the get-go and kind of put that into the calculation.
Totally. Okay, we're going to dive deeper in a second. We're going to bring a guest on and their startup is basically built on very remote teams. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. Okay, we are back. Our guest today is Brant Cebulla. He's the co-founder of Scalero. And they have used remote teams successfully since their founding. So, Brant, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here. Good seeing you guys.
Good to see you. And we have worked together for many, many years. But let's talk about Scalero. What do you guys do, and how do you use remote teams?
Yeah. So high level, we're a lifecycle marketing consulting studio. So lifecycle marketing, that's email marketing, SMS, direct mail, push notification. Anything that relates to marketing to your existing database of users. And we have people working at Scalero from all over the world. So we kind of have hubs in San Francisco, New York City, and Mexico City. But we're not too particular with whether you're in those cities or not. So I would say for sure Mexico City, though, is kind of our remote hub that we have at Scalero.
And they are, when you say remote, are they also not sitting together? They're also working at home, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, COVID's kind of made this a little bit fuzzy, right? We do have offices, and we encourage people to come in, but I think in reality, folks are coming in, I don't know, once a month, once a week in a good month.
Let's hope that office isn't too expensive. That empty
yeah,
office.
not too bad. Yeah.
No, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so how big's the team now, Brant?
Yeah, so we have 30 to 40 folks, and of those 30 to 40 folks, I would say 20 are in Mexico City. And we're doing like a range of kind of roles there. So in lifecycle marketing, it's you need a little bit of everything discipline-wise. You might need some designers, you might need some developers, you might need data engineers, analysis, project managers, all sorts. And we actually kind of hire for all roles in Mexico City. We're not too particular with that. Yeah.
Okay, so you I'm a little bit curious now. You're really doubling down on Mexico City. Why is that?
Yeah, so we did start by hiring designers and developers in Mexico City, and our initial thought was, we want our back of the house in Mexico City, and we want the front of the house in the United States. So, we have clients. Most of them are based in the United States. We have some like multinational corporations we work with, certainly. But most for sure are kind of based in the U.S. So our original thinking was, hey, let's have a U.S. front of the house that interact with our clients, and then kind of a Mexico City back of the house of design, development, data engineering, things like that. And, we got into it, I can't remember the timeline now, maybe 6 to 12 months in, and we were like, man, this team in Mexico City, they're just flat out good. Maybe we should start hiring for more front-facing roles. We gave it a shot, and turns out they were quite good at front-facing roles as well. So at this point, we'll just hire for anything in Mexico City. I do like having folks in the States too. I mean, I think it's kind of certainly in consulting important to have boots on the ground in New York City and the Bay Area. But when we're hiring, we're really looking at all three cities these days, and we don't really discriminate where we want that hire. We're just looking for the best folks, essentially.
Yeah. Obviously there's a cost component to that too, right? I guess Mexico, there's a difference between Mexico City and San Francisco.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, I mean, we got started in 2019, and I think we made our first Mexico City hire in 2020. And at that time, it was just a value play for sure. It's like, we can hire somebody in the Bay Area to help us with our business, or we could probably hire a designer and a developer in Mexico City at the same rate. So it just allowed us to accelerate way faster than I think hiring in the Bay Area.
Yeah. Before we dig in, Theis, any comments on this, on Mexico City and what they're doing?
No, it's super interesting, and it mimics one thing that I'm working on currently. Like people I work with are actually, I'm based in Copenhagen. I work with people in Egypt, and one thing that's nice about that is that the time zone difference is kind of it's
manageable.
It's very manageable. It's 1 hour time zone difference, which is really nice. It's usually one of the big issues if you are either in the US or Europe and you want to have your developers in, let's say, India or even Eastern Europe. So having that kind of going south instead of east-west has worked real well for me. I think, Brant, maybe, how are you on that? I guess for a time zone difference, Mexico City is pretty optimal for you guys.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, prior to Scalero, experience working with folks in Eastern Europe and in India, and I think both of those regions do fantastic work. But the time zone is a killer. And then culturally, I think there's something to that, right? So I think Mexico is not only like a time zone fit, but it's kind of a culture fit too with the United States. So to us, it's kind of a double whammy on why that was appealing. I think it's more common now, but I was a bit confused in 2019 why folks in the Bay Area or New York tended to go Eastern European or India when you have a huge talent pool in Latin America. And I think fast forward 5 years ago, certainly the pandemic probably influenced this, but I think hiring and staffing in Latin America is definitely more common today than it was 5 years ago.
Yeah, totally. So many people,
interesting.
so much talent. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to structure the conversation a little bit here. So we're going to put it into 4 different segments. First one being hiring, then building trust and communication, managing productivity and accountability, and overcoming cultural and time zone differences. Let's start with hiring. So, Brant, how did you actually find all these people?
Yeah, so we just did it just like we would hire in the Bay Area. So I think, early on we started posting jobs on AngelList. I think it's called
Okay.
WellFound now. But 2019, it was kind of the startup job board place, and we posted a role for a designer and a developer, separate roles in Mexico City, and we just started getting applicants. There was nothing to it from there. We were obviously really picky with kind of our first hire. So we were really looking for someone with kind of general manager, type skills and wants.
Yeah.
And, maybe that's a little different to some people listening. Maybe they're just trying to hire for the role and some skills.
Specific.
We wanted to have a base, we just thought it'd be easier if we had 10, 20 folks eventually in Mexico City. So we were like, we want a designer, but you also need to be a general manager. So that's who we were looking for originally. And, over time, we also used just traditional recruiting methods on LinkedIn with good success. And we've used Upwork too. Yeah, it's a little bit more mixed bag. I'm sure you guys probably want to dig into Upwork a little bit more. And I know you have experience with that. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So the first one there, you got, did you test them really well? Did you hire them for a week first? And how would you do that?
Yeah, I think the nice thing about running a consulting firm is that you can actually kind of test their work and actually use that work like live and see how, your clients are reacting to that work. So we certainly did that. I think what's important at Scalero is IQ, sample work, things like that. So we always test rigorously, just like you would. You're hiring locally. For those first few hires, I think company and culture fit are probably more important than your 10th, 20th hire. So, we did plenty of interviewing too in those early days.
Yeah, you said Upwork. I definitely want to dig a little bit in there. For a lot of startups, that's a way to start. It could be Upwork or any of the other platforms for this. But like you say, I think it is very much a mixed bag, and I would definitely test a little bit more if I was on those platforms. Any comments, Theis?
Yeah, I might walk back the Upwork statement a little bit. I think I've been pretty pleased with work on there. It's just the folks that are looking for work on Upwork, they kind of like the remote nature of Upwork. I find that they really like kind of tasks, with clear, start and end definitions. And for us, we're trying to build a company. So, we're just looking for like people who want to be part of a team, want to build a team. And, Upwork's maybe less of a fit for that, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that you would in that case you would be using Upwork as a recruitment platform, and in its nature, that's not what it is, right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah. We
Any
have
comments,
had
Theis?
some success transferring folks over from Upwork to the full team, but that's on the rare side for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's one thing that I've also used Upwork for in the very recent past has been I've had a couple of standalone projects that I've then had done on Upwork, and then one of the guys really stand out, and then I create a dedicated role outside of Upwork for that guy in a more permanent setup, right? So in that sense, the project on Upwork is actually the recruiting tool.
Yeah, I've used Upwork honestly for a long time. I mean, having people on for years and just paying through Upwork, and they have tracking tools. They have all kinds of things. Sure, they charge, but it just gives a little bit of safety on both sides. So it can work for that too, honestly.
It can work for that. I think with Upwork, it's just there's a lot of garbage up front. Like if you put something out, you just get so much spam coming in, and like ChatGPT has not made this easier. I had this kind of cheap way out a couple of years ago on Upwork, where I would just at the very bottom of my specs that I put out as a job description, I would have that in your application, please write the following line, right? I would have some kind of secret word that would be at the very end of the document that they had to put in, because then at least I knew that they had read the documentation before they put their bid in. Well, what happens today is that they all just put it through this kind of ChatGPT AI, and you just by now you get, within a few minutes, you get amazing on the surface like responses from people that have like completely read through the specs and sound really knowledgeable about these things, but actually, it's just as spammy as it used to be. It's just higher quality spam. So there's a lot of you have to sift through a lot of garbage there.
This is where you need to build defense, Theis. Now you have ChatGPT to actually read. So it's just ChatGPT going back and forth at that point.
Well, I've become really good. I became really good quite early on like detecting when a text was from a ChatGPT, because you could also just see it. They would just pick out a few weird specifics from the specs, and like you could smell it from a mile away. But yeah, it's there's a lot of crap on Upwork, but it's about finding those nuggets of gold out there, and it takes a bit more work up front to kind of sift through it.
Yeah. Okay. So Theis is already on to the do's and don'ts when it comes to hiring. So let's dig into that a little bit. And I'm going to start out here with a couple of things of notes that I had when we talked about this before. So on Upwork and similar platform, I would hire people. And one key rule for me was always build the smallest possible project to begin with. Like when you're testing people, just like not even MVP, it's like it has ideas of an MVP, but just smaller, because that tells you, do they have some technical abilities and can you communicate, and all those things that are just as important. That's one thing. And the other thing is I would just hire 2 people and pay them both, and then pick one of them for more long term. Just find this tiny project, hire 2 people, the best one you can find, and then pick one of them. Again, pay them both. That works really well. Other do's and don'ts from you guys?
Yeah, for us, we make all applicants take 3 10-minute tests on a platform called Test Gorilla. It's a site with 100 different tests, and in some senses, we're kind of looking for proficiency in English in these tests, even though we're not testing that directly. So a lot of our tests, will be like, if you're applying for a dev role, we're going to give you a math test and, I don't know, maybe a problem-solving test. And it's in English, so you're going to have to work through the problems in English. It kind of already naturally tests language proficiency when we do that. And then at the same time, you're measuring competency, IQ, things of that nature that you would already be doing locally anyhow. My other do, I would say, is at some point, it's probably good to hop on a Zoom call with your applicants. You don't need to solve world hunger on that Zoom call, but just making sure it's a real person, and they can kind of chat a little bit with you goes a long way for sure.
I agree.
Yeah. I have on my list also. It tastes of the same, but I value communication higher on these kind of tests and kind of the input I get from people than I would otherwise do if it was a local role, someone that I would have next to me. For these remote roles, I value their communication skills. It's sometimes even higher than their technical skills. Like it's really important that it's someone who is not just good at English and can kind of communicate, but also is just responsive, right? And has
that's discipline too, right?
There's a discipline to it, and there's a positivity to it as well, in kind of how do they approach the communication, because it's gonna be some really long work days if you're constantly gonna have to chase people for updates, and if they're not proactive, and if they're just like uncommunicative. So I value that like really highly, and probably higher than I would if it was just a local role.
Okay, we're going to move to the next one, and that is building trust and communication. And this is a big one. How do you communicate? And how do you build trust for the long term? So let's have a little bit of chat about that. We're going to talk about productivity and accountability in a second. So let's see if we stay with trust and communication here to begin with. And Brant, how do you communicate with your team?
I don't think we look that much different than a company that is maybe dispersed through the United States or Europe. We're communicating on Slack on a daily basis. We encourage the team to communicate both on work and non-work things on Slack. And then we have Zoom calls, and our expectation is that our staff in Mexico participates in calls just as much as somebody in the United States is based. So, we really don't have issues there around communication. That's kind of the expectation from day one. And in some ways, going back to the hiring process, that kind of weeds out candidates that aren't a good fit. We're very upfront about what the expectation there is.
Yeah, I mean, you're saying they're an equal member of the team, and they're on the Zoom calls, they're on the Slack channels, all those things, right?
Yep, exactly.
Leads me to another question here, real quick, Brant. Did you set up a legal structure there too, or do they send invoices, or how does that work?
Yeah, we haven't. Everybody is on a contract with our United States entity. I think when we get to a certain size, we'll probably set up an entity in Mexico, but we're just not quite at that size yet where that makes sense.
No. Yeah. So I think Theis and I can really align what you're saying there with, hey, they're treated as anyone else and they're equal team members. However it is, if it's an employee or a part-time outsource, whatever it is. What do you say, Theis?
Yeah, and I think COVID to some extent kind of leveled the playing field on these things. And like Brant says, also there's not a big difference between what Brant is doing in Scalero with Mexico City, and then what kind of any setup in the US or Europe would do with people working in different locations. I think you just by now you have it's a much more normalized approach to working with someone that you don't necessarily see in the physical world on a daily basis. So by now I think you have tools that are much stronger than you did a couple of years ago, and you also just have some, let's say, some cultural changes that has just made it a lot easier,
more common. So the one thing we often talk about on this when it comes to communication is, hey, let's jump out to the whiteboard and talk through a few things. Are there any tools for that these days, Brant? How do you let's say you couldn't fly down there, how would you do that if you want to have a creative session?
A creative session, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I to Theis's point, I mean, tooling gets better and better in this space, especially in a post-pandemic world. We use FigJam, for example. It's kind of like a whiteboard where multiple users are in there and drawing up things for sure. I would say that, it's great. Yeah, it's good software. It's fun. They make it fun. I would say I'm not really sure this is a remote team or cross-country challenge, but I think that there's something lost, not having everybody in the same office. But I don't see that as a U.S. versus Mexico challenge. I just see that as a challenge of, people living elsewhere. Yeah.
What do you say, Theis?
No, for sure. For all the advantages that you have with a kind of dispersed setup, this to me is the huge disadvantage that you just don't have this kind of natural cohesiveness, and it just comes out in a bunch of different and a lot of times negative ways of like a lack of creativity, a lack of culture, a lot of cohesiveness in the team, sometimes a lack of motivation. Like there's a lot of things that you just get naturally and for free by having people in the same location and creating social connections. And you have to work a lot more kind of consciously and proactively on these things, and it can be really hard to achieve that when you have a dispersed team.
Yeah, 100%.
I have found that onboarding new employees has probably taken the biggest hit, and in this post-pandemic world, and this would be an issue for sure, hiring remote even without the pandemic, but just like employees not sitting next to their colleagues and just picking up things they didn't know they needed to pick up, like that's missing. And it just seems to be taking new employees, 3 months to get entirely onboarded when, 5 years ago, maybe it would have been 1 month. To me, that's painful for sure. Hiring remote.
Yeah, totally. It's just, I mean, it's a cultural part too, right? You can't do the intense part. Hey, you're going to the office every day, boom, 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 and then they're onboarded properly. I think I remember one thing, Theis, when the pandemic started, we one thing we'd done a lot of product work before it started, and there was a lot of engineering coming. I remember we said that when it came, like, okay, we don't have to go to the office now because we're very far on the product side. So a lot of work is engineering, which gave us some breathing room, right? It's a little bit similar to having a remote team.
Yeah, I think yes. I think what happened for us on the positive sense was that we had a lot of projects that were kind of midstream.
Yeah.
And they were kind of easy to just carry on because a lot of the creative parts, all those decisions had been made already. We'd done all the whiteboarding, and now it was really about executing, and that worked out really. And actually, sometimes it was more efficient because people would have actually better, quieter, more efficient work environments when they didn't have to deal with all the shit going on in the office, right? But then you got to this point where, yeah, these projects were wrapped up and we had to start like new cycles and new sprints and so on. And that's when we really started to see, it's actually really hard to get new stuff started. It's hard to Brant's point, get a new person into the existing circle. It's hard to get things off the ground. It's hard to be creative when you're not in the same room. It's not impossible. It's just harder.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to some do's and don'ts in trust and communication. The one thing I will say, and we've touched on a little bit, is just be extremely precise when you communicate. Theis, do you want to start that one?
Well, I guess if I should speak to the trust part, I actually think this is something where if you are sometimes too trusty, it can come back and bite you in the butt. You do have to ask some really obvious and kind of sometimes painful questions of like, are you actually working now? And even if people say like, okay, can you please show me your screen, or like show me, because sometimes you can really, it's so much easier to get away with stuff when you are not there and when you're just completely remote and when you say, well, I'm actually on the other side of the world. And sometimes you have to be a bit harsh on that. And of course that can go against building trust, but you can also just waste a lot of time if you let people just get away with shit for too long. So sometimes you actually have to ask the kind of uncomfortable questions and to make sure that people are fully on board.
Don't give them a long leash. That's what it doesn't.
Yeah.
So on that, Theis, I'll give you another story, but if you've heard about this Upwork has a tracker, right? So you can say, hey, I'm on working hourly basis. You know how that works?
No. Is it like the keyboard? If they're active,
it also takes screenshots. It takes every 3 minutes. Just takes a screenshot. Dang.
Yeah. And
which is aggressive, right?
It's very and this. I guess this is also why I bring up the point, because this is very counter-natural to me. Like this is not the way I naturally work. I'm really into giving people the freedom and the trust to go do your thing. It's just that when you never see each other in the real world, and like when you don't have a proper physical daily check-in, it's just you can just get away with stuff, right? I had this situation. I was working with a guy in India, and I was working for him for 6 months. And it took me 6 months to one day realize that actually it was not just this guy; it was actually him and his wife that I was working with. I had apparently hired a full team. I was chatting with like one person, right, on the messaging service, but it was actually him and his wife. And I kind of picked up on it because sometimes there would be these weird gaps in the knowledge of like, we'd had some banter the day before about something random, and then the next day he seemed to have completely forgotten about it.
Loss.
Because they actually had this flow where when they took the shift, they would read through the entire log of dialogue with me, right, to kind of catch up. And sometimes they didn't have time to do that, so there would be these gaps. But it took me like 6 months before I realized that I was actually working with two people. Anyway, it just goes to show that anyone can be anything on the internet, and it's back to the point of trust that you actually sometimes have to ask these kind of what seems to be uncomfortable questions, like, hey, can you please turn on your webcam? Can you just turn up your webcam right now? Because like, let's have a chat. And it can be a bit confrontational, and it actually goes against very much the way I like to work. I'm very much into the trust and letting people do their thing, and as long as they deliver what I need. But in the remote situation, actually, sometimes you do have to be a bit more on point with asking people.
But yeah, imagine the future, Theis. At least these were two people, right? So I mean, it's all going to be AI. Like, who knows? People are just, this is going to be more and more tricky, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
sure.
let's move on. Now we're going to talk about managing productivity and accountability, and we've touched on it a little bit, but let's get going. I mean, what do you guys use, Brant? You want to start with you? How do you measure people? Do you check in morning, evening, or is it just your normal meetings and so on?
Yeah, I think our business is unique in that we're, working with all of our clients on a daily basis. So, if a client is really having an issue with an employee, that's going to surface, immediately, essentially. So in some senses, we're kind of lucky that our clients have a good pulse of employee performance, just as much as we do. As far as and this maybe kind of goes back to the last segment a little bit, but if something doesn't feel right with an employee, I can't say I look at this on like a daily basis or proactively, but we'll pull up things like Slack analytics, and see how many messages are people posting. Are they posting in many channels? And for those listening, this isn't creepy, by the way. Like I can't read like
No. It's
messages. Like
meta
anybody
data.
can pull up these data in an organization. And sometimes that data kind of refutes your gut feeling, but oftentimes it does actually kind of check the way you might be feeling about an employee. And I find that like as long as somebody's working, doing honest work, putting in a good shift, productivity isn't really an issue. But if they're not communicating, they're not online, they're not doing work, then productivity generally is an issue.
Well, yeah, I know this is different, but often when you do like one project and people that don't have the experience, they think they can do the specs and then send them over in a document and then come back 3 weeks later and say, yeah, and then I saw what they built and they had built a totally different thing. Look, there's no such thing as building a spec and then sending it over and then think it's going to come out like you expect. You need to check in on a daily basis, like almost morning and evening, when you do a project with a new person, at least. What do you say, Theis?
Yeah, and I think there's an element of this which is also one of the I think the disadvantages or something that's really hard with remote or people that are not in the same offices. It can be really hard to kind of build this culture of achievement and like, hey, I actually want to make this company successful, right? Which is if you're good at it, you can build that into your team, and you can get this team spirit of like, yeah, let's pull together and kind of, sometimes it's the simple thing of like, let's go the extra mile and let's put in the extra hours, but it's also just, it's something more than that. There's a certain spirit to it and just this kind of a wish for the company to do well, right? And that can be, I think, quite hard to do. I think a lot of times I've had that as a challenge with a remote team, that they simply didn't have the same. They might have a local team spirit, but it might not be fully aligned with what you want to achieve as a company. It can be quite hard to get that rolling with a remote team.
I agree. As we go through all these subjects, it feels like when we get to the final ones, we've covered them totally. When we get to, because we talk so much about. By the way, any final notes on productivity and accountability? If not, we are going to overcoming cultural and time zone differences. And again, I feel like we've touched it a little bit. Let's start with the time zone. That's very specific and easy. I mean, you said it already, Theis. It's easier to go north-south than it is to go east-west. You need some kind of overlap when you work with somebody. And the shorter that overlap is, the harder it gets. I don't think it's more complicated than that, right?
It's not more complicated than that, but actually I think if you do have that situation of a minimal overlap, you should actually try to then use it to your advantage, right? Because you can actually then also have that advantage that, okay, now I have 5 hours to go through your work and create feedback and line up the next tasks. And I actually have time to do that. And then we can do a handover, and then you have time to do your thing. And then take advantage, but then you really need to set up your work structure for asynchronous work. But if you do it well, you can actually end up in a situation where you're really efficient because you kind of have an organization that's churning out stuff on a continuous 24-hour basis, and something is always moving forward and always happening. So you can also work it to your advantage, but to your point, a lot of times things go wrong because you do need a check-in and you do need to correct things when they're not going in the right direction. And sometimes you just lose a day's work because, you misunderstood, or the file I thought I sent to you never arrived, and now you just
It was actually just the wrong format. It did arrive. It was
thumbs.
the wrong format.
Yeah. So you have those things, right? So I think you can also sometimes work it to your advantage.
Totally. What do you say, Brant?
Yeah, I time zone difference, huge. I remember having calls with folks in India and it's 3 a.m. their time, but they're on board to.
Was this the wife or the husband?
I can't get that out of my head.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I find people around the world are quite accommodating if you're paying them money to do something, but it's just one of those things. I was never able to get out of my head. Like, God, it's 3 a.m. for you. Like, how are you doing this?
Or
it feels like my productivity is. Should you be doing this? Exactly. So, to me, same time zone is great, and I would take it a step further. I'm in San Francisco, and there's a lot of hubs in Latin America. You could do Mexico City, Bogota, Buenos Aires is really popular. Sao Paulo. Mexico City is a 4-hour plane ride for me. And I found we tried getting down there like ASAP as soon as we started hiring folks. And I think that hiring offshore can be quite awkward, I think, over time. And if you just kind of fight through that immediately, you get in person, you shake hands, you smile, it goes a long way, a long run. Certainly if you're trying to complete a 30-hour task on Upwork, it probably doesn't matter that much. But if you're trying to build a company, you're trying to build a team, I would encourage people to pick a spot that they can get to in a day's time pretty easily, and make an effort to have a connection there for sure.
Absolutely. I can completely echo that. I mean, we talked about our Bucharest setup. Heine, I spent quite a lot of time there. And it was also it was great because I could get there in 3-4 hours, and I would spend maybe a week, a month per month there. And it just means so much to everything. And especially that culture part that I was talking about, of like imbuing some kind of sense of, hey, why are we actually working on this? And why are we doing these things? I think that went a long way. So yeah, if you can find a place, especially to Brant's point, if it's a long-term project, somewhere you can actually go to physically is just super
let's talk about the cultural thing here, and we mentioned a little bit about sort of being able to adapt, and Theis, you're pretty clear. You said like we have to adapt as the one that's if we're the one telling others to do, and I'm sure that's not black and white, but what are your thoughts on cultural difference? We can start with you, Brant. Is the culture in Mexico compared to the US, it's pretty similar? How do you see that?
Yeah, I think on the spectrum of countries in the world, the fact that we're right next to each other, we're pretty close, I think, in the spectrum of things. But it does show up. I think the biggest thing, folks in Mexico, they have this kind of very lovely floral way of speaking. They'll ask how you and your family are doing, and kind of chit chat for 5 minutes before they actually get to the thing they want to talk about. And Americans and Danes too, right? They're super direct. So I'll send a Slack message that's just like right to the point. And I think it's quite offensive to Mexican culture, frankly. So it's a little bit of adapting both. Our expectation is our American team kind of think about that when they communicate. But then we kind of also ask our Mexico teams just kind of go with the flow, and recognize that it's not personal. It's just kind of how Americans are. So that's been a learning experience for sure. Yeah. And the nice thing about, going back, the nice thing about Mexico is there's a lot of Mexicans in the United States, and there's a lot of American tourists in Mexico. So both countries have plenty of experience kind of working with each other.
Are you close to any Mexicans,
across various things in life? yeah, I'm burying the lead here, but my wife is Mexican for sure, so that helps. I mean, I think they kind of gave the confidence to do this in the first place. Yeah,
totally. So if we go around the world a little bit, I think one of the things we've talked about, India, is a little bit different than how we are. I think if you take the Mexican part and then go to India, I think the difference might be even bigger. What do you say, Theis?
Yeah, like the Brandt's point about being direct, right? I think that's something that you really have to take into account also when you are then working, for example, with the Indian team. You and I talked about it
Yeah.
before, Heine, but so if you combine the fact that I'm super direct with the fact that most people on our Indian teams would have this tendency to just agree, right, and postpone a problem down the line, because just say that if I ask if it's possible to do by Friday, just say yes. So when you kind of combine this very direct tone with the tendency to just try to make things work, that can create kind of a toxic situation where you just end up with a ton of problems when you actually get to Friday and it's not done, right? And I think that was the point I tried to make earlier, where it's really you should take on that on yourself then, and say, okay, if that's the culture I'm working with, how do I communicate in a way that's more constructive? How do I work around this cultural difference to
and
make
if you
it
don't
a
do that, you will
success?
fail. I mean, it's just, if you don't know those things and realize those things, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. I will, just as an example of like, I guess, a very fundamental cultural difference, but one that works really to my advantage. With the guy I'm working with in Egypt, he's a Muslim, and one of the things that works out really well is that for him, he has, Friday is the day that you're not working. Right, Friday is the day you're not working, and then Saturday is a day off, right? So you kind of have, so that's the weekend, which means that for him it's totally normal to work on Sundays, which normally for me is definitely a day off. And that, so for us, it really works well with doing the asynchronous part, because most of the days of the week we can work together in almost the same time zone and on the same things. But then, I can kind of have a slow Friday because I know he's off anyway. So like I can just like prep stuff and so on. We're both off on Saturday, and then he can work his ass off Sunday with the stuff that I prep for him, and we can then look at it together on Mondays. So kind of, sometimes you can use these things to your advantage, where you still, respect your local cultures and habits and so on, but actually get the best out
It's
of it.
almost like what you're also saying. This is just an example, but you're saying embrace it, use it, whatever it is, time difference, cultural difference, use them all. Yeah. Okay. Any final notes on this before we go on a short break? Okay, we're going to go on a short break. When we come back, we're going to have some final thoughts on this, but also specifically look at advantages and disadvantages. We will be right back. We are back. So in the final segment here, I want to wrap it up a little bit, talking like overall about advantages and disadvantages with having remote teams and outsourcing. So I'm going to ask you to pick like one or two of each. And Theis, do you want to get going with the advantages? And is that too easy, Theis? But go ahead, Theis.
I think we have to mention like the cost aspect of this, right? There is just an advantage cost wise. It's not as simple as just, here I pay X and locally I pay 3X. It's not as simple as that, because you have a lot of hidden costs on communication and speed and so on, right? But there is just overall an advantage on the cost side.
100%. Okay, then I'll take the next one because I want to make sure it's easy. I mean, the second thing is, and they're sort of combined. I think a little bit harsh to call it supply, but supply or availability, which also translates into speed. It means that, hey, Theis, look, I'd like to build this small app. Can you find someone who knows Flutter tomorrow? And the answer is yes, you can, right? And hiring somebody in San Francisco or New York or Copenhagen would take some time, but you could get this ball rolling tomorrow. So speed, supply and speed, I think would be my next advantage here. What do you say, Brant?
Yeah, I've got two. Kind of hijacking your last point. You're also dipping into like a new talent pool, essentially. In the Bay Area, if you're trying to hire somebody with that specialty, you're competing with 1,000 other companies. You move that to Latin America, competition not that strong, and you just have an untapped talent pool, essentially. The thing I've noticed, actually, the thing I love is it's truly like an enriching experience for your employees. And I'm not just saying this like as like a wokeism kind of thing. Like it really makes a difference. Like employees love it. I think our folks in America, they love working with our team in Mexico. Our folks in Mexico love working with our American team, and it's fun seeing them interact with each other, see what the commonalities are, what the differences are. It's just fun.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that makes a big difference for sure.
And again, like we said before, embrace it, and that part you should also enjoy it. It's great. What other advantages, Theis? You got more?
I would actually say that if you are able to embrace some of the time zone disadvantages, right? If you are able to embrace the fact that you can work asynchronously, you can turn that into an advantage. You can actually get a lot of stuff done because suddenly you have this kind of engine that's running constantly. It's a bit dangerous because sometimes the car is driving in the wrong direction,
or if something breaks on the way,
like,
oh shit, that we didn't get the right file, and boom.
Yeah, but if you work on that constantly, and you kind of if you just say that, okay, this is the way the world is for us, we have to make this work as best as we can, then you can actually turn it into an advantage that you have something that can constantly be executed on. Also, because sometimes you do have, if you have iterative work, you actually need some time to, for example, take the deliverable they have, test it out, create feedback to it. And instead of them just sitting there and waiting in their work hours, maybe they're sleeping or eating instead, right? And you can use, so if you can use it to your advantage, then it's great.
And another example, you did mention an example before. Another one is this podcast here, right? So when we're done here, sometimes it's in the evening. I have people in the Philippines, and they will get up 5 hours before me, right? So everything's ready for them. They can start to work right away. When I get up, it's sort of fully edited and we're ready to go, right? So that's a way of using it, I would say.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a great example.
We could get back to advantages later, but let's work on the disadvantages. And this one, I'm going to take it right away because otherwise you'll just steal all the good ideas. So I don't want that to happen again. I mean, the biggest, I don't know if this is the biggest one, is I called it no whiteboard work, meaning these creative processes where you are with people working for a few hours to brainstorm, to draw something on a whiteboard, can be really, really hard to get done. I mean, that I think is one of the bigger disadvantages. And that can be solved by just jumping on a plane if that's possible at all. It might not be for everyone, but it can be. What else you got?
I think that's definitely a huge disadvantage. And for me, it's really, if I lived in a world where I had infinite money and infinite supply of people around me, I would always choose to have a local team. So if I should to be harsh, I would almost always prefer a local team versus a remote team. But there is just the reality of the world is that I don't have infinite money, and the people in whatever city you live in, they might not be available to you
on that particular Tuesday
for those skills
when you need them.
On that particular Tuesday for those skills you need, right? So given that, you kind of have to sometimes work and make the remote setup work. But so that's it's a roundabout way of saying that I think there's a lot of disadvantages when you compare a remote team to a local team. I think the creative side that you talk about, all the kind of back and forth, all the cultural stuff that the company cultural stuff that you miss out on, I think is a huge disadvantage, and it's just harder to make people really get deeply engaged in your mission and your vision when they just don't drink the Kool-Aid every morning by going through the door and seeing everybody else excited about this stuff.
I mean, a headline to that, Theis, could be maintaining company culture, right?
Yeah.
What is that, Brant?
It's hard.
Yeah, I would just add to that at first is that we've certainly hired employees that are kind of all in on who Scalero is and what we're trying to build, and that works great. And then we've had our fair share of folks who come in who they're really just looking to get paid and complete tasks. And I think it's quite hard building a company or products or whatever you're working on with those types of folks. And I just remember like some of the early days, like trying to convince that type of folk like why they should be all in on Scalero, and I was probably wasting my time, honestly. It's just not the kind of role the person was looking for. But I think when you have this is probably obvious, right? When you have your full team on board, they're all in on your company and what you're trying to achieve, you're just going to build better products. You're going to build a better team, a more successful company.
Well, I want to use this opportunity to give a huge shout out to the Vivino team in Ukraine. When we talk about company culture and kind of owning what you do, I mean, and back to Brant's point, it's also about being super lucky with hiring just the right people. We started with Alexei and Dmitry in Ukraine, and they were kind of the cornerstones of that team, and that team has just shown like tremendous energy around the Vivino mission. Like they have been climbing mountains with a Vivino flag to plant it on top of the mountain, right? They are super into it. I'm just so proud of that, and feel so good to see those kind of things. And so it's to Brant's point, it's definitely possible,
but it's harder
to make this happen. It's just harder, and you have to have a bit of luck in terms of getting that type of people on board.
Brant, did you have a last final comment on disadvantages?
Yeah. So the other disadvantage, I think, is we can manage having an international team at Scalero internally, but for us, we're a consultancy, so we have clients, we're client facing, and we don't always know how they're going to kind of perceive working with an international company. That kind of just gives, I think, a general sense of anxiety for me on, how's the client going to enjoy working with a remote team, an international team, and that's just something that like I wouldn't have that anxiety if I had just all local folks here in the Bay Area.
Yeah, might be prejudices you have to fight. Have you had any problems with prejudices and saying, "What is this?"
I'm sure, but I haven't seen anything or heard anything that's been super direct around that.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so we're going to move on to a segment we do every single week here. I think really, honestly, we came really sort of well around this subject, so I'm very happy with what we got. The thing we always do here in the end is talk about what we're obsessed with right now, and there are no limits to how big, how small these things can be. But today I'm going to start, and it's going to be a smaller, weirder thing today because sometimes these are bigger things. And it's about the one book I'm reading and the next one that I am going to read. And actually the book's title, which I think were a little bit funky and funny. So the one I'm reading right now is about Donald Trump's business acumen, or some would say maybe lack hereof, but it's about, and I love the name of it. It has like a picture of a sort of a jackpot machine, and it's called Lucky Loser. I just love the title of that book too. I think it's really funny. The other book, which I'm not reading yet, but I want to read soon, has an even better title. And I was just fascinated by the title of this book. And the subtitle is called How Elon Destroyed Twitter. But the title of the book, and hold on now, it's just fucking amazing. It's called Character Limit.
Very clever.
That is very clever, right? I love that title.
That's one of those books that started with the title, and then they had to figure out how to write it.
How do we build around this? So that was my short story here. Theis, you wanna go next?
With what I'm obsessed with, well, I would say what I'm passionate with this week. You went small, Heiner. I'm gonna go even smaller, literally. So what I'm very passionate about this week is that we got a puppy.
Oh, really?
So we have a puppy now. She's 8 weeks old, so really tiny, still being house trained. Very, very cute. And it does bring me back a bit to suddenly being a parent of a small child. Like, one thing is that you find yourself encouraging someone else's bowel movements when they do it at the right time. You step on toys in the middle of the night in the darkness, these kind of things. So it brings me back to those days as well. Anyways, she's super enjoyable, ultra cute.
What is she?
And yeah, it's just. So the breed, it's I don't think it's an official breed, but it's called a golden doodle. Okay. So it's basically, you take a golden retriever and you take a poodle and you put them in a room together and close the door and hope they have fun.
I guess they didn't this time.
And then and in this case they did, and here's the result. One of the great things about them is that they are very allergy friendly, because they're the poodles. I think in general, poodles are they basically don't shed. or only shed minimally, and this she then takes that character trait as well. So she has very allergy friendly fur, which means that I have no excuses now, right? We are stuck with this dog.
That's exciting.
For a long,
Have
long
you
time,
had regrets yet?
which is very enjoyable. No, you can't. When you look at her
There's no
face,
way
you cannot be angry. So it's funny, nice. It's hard work, like it is. These like early weeks, when you house train them, it's actually quite a lot of work. So you have to take it seriously. But I think the payoff is big.
I'm excited.
So
to see
that's
the
super
puppy,
nice.
I must say.
Yeah.
Brant, what do you got?
Well, Theis, I think you went bigger than Heine. Heine brought up a book he hasn't even
2
read
books.
yet.
And one I've started on.
You can't go smaller
that
than
is
something
true.
you haven't
That is
done.
true.
And then, you basically have a new child. So congrats on that.
Little puppy.
Thank you.
Yeah. My obsession right now, I think probably is a CEO or founder cliche. I'm super into running right now. So I have a toddler at home, and I'm running a company, and I just don't have any mental capacity to read books or take on a new dog. So if I want some free time, just stepping out the door and just running for an hour is great. It's good for mental health
100%.
too. I think I was reading some studies recently where they compared all these complicated medical interventions to improve people's mental health, and they all kind of are not as good as just like going for a run or working out or whatever. So it's just an easy thing to do.
Do you do anything? So when you're on the run, do you listen to anything like on a podcast or anything? Obviously, you listen to this podcast religiously.
Apart from
but do you do that on your runs, or do you just let your mind go where it wants to?
That's right. If there's a new episode of Founders Weekly, I'll put that on. But if there's not, I'm a music guy. I like listening to music. That's another, when you have a wife and kids in the house, you don't really get to listen to your own stuff. So I like just getting kind of lost listening to music.
Amazing.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, and a good recommendation. You might not be as good a runner as Brant, but at least go for a walk. Do whatever. Just do whatever you can do to get the exercise. That's for sure.
That's right. Not a good runner. Trying to get back into that.
You are a better runner than me. That's I'm sure. But anyway, thank you very much, guys. We've come to the end of another episode of Founders Weekly. Thank you, Brant, and thank you, Theis.
Thank you, Heine.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys.
Please make sure you follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and leave a review and rating. It really helps. For those of you on YouTube, make sure you check out Raw Startup. A lot of good videos about how to build a startup. This has been Founders Weekly. Now stop listening, go build something.